Good morning, Stampers. Welcome to Learning with Friends. I'm Pat Fairless from Fairless Stamp and Flair, and I'm so glad you're here. I have a really fun, easy technique for you today. I think it'd be one that if you ever like to stamp with your young kids or maybe your grandkids, they would like doing this one too. It's called blowing bubbles, and who didn't love blowing bubbles as a kid, right? It was always fun. And this technique makes some unique backgrounds and it's easy and it's fun. So let's just go ahead and get right to it. All right, you don't need very much. You need some cardstock. You can use, the nice thing about this technique is that you can use pretty much any kind of basic white, probably very vanilla would work also, but light colored cardstock that you have. I'm going to show it to you on basic white. And then if you've been a Stampin' Up! Person for a while, you remember the days of shimmery white, which we all loved. It's great for techniques and it's got shimmer. So that's always fun, right? And then I'm also going to show it to you on some glossy cardstock. I'm actually going to use photo paper and it works fine on all of these. I would say with the basic white, you probably have to be the most careful because water is involved. How else would you blow bubbles? So all you need is some cardstock, a little jar of water, and some dish detergent. And I'm going to use my Dawn. You can use whatever you use. A re-inker of any color, and I'll give you some pointers as we go through that. And we need a straw. So that's all that's needed. So the first thing we do is this has got water in it. It's probably about an inch from the top. It works best to use a bowl that is wider at the top and shallow. And that just is because you're going to be dipping your cardstock into the bubbles. So you want this surface to be as much as it can be. We're just going to add a little detergent. Doesn't really matter how much. You just need enough to blow bubbles. And we'll stir it up a little bit to get the detergent in the mixed well in the water. Obviously my Dawn detergent is blue. Don't worry about that. It hasn't really seemed to change the color of the inks at all that I've noticed. And then you need a re-inker. And I'm going to use Gorgeous Grape. Just a couple of words of recommendations, some hints. The darker colors work maybe a little bit better. I do have a card though that I used Calypso Coral, which is a subtle, and it worked. The only thing is you'll have to play around depending on what color you use by how much ink you add to the water. And it's also going to matter how much water you use. So that's why you don't want a big giant bowl because then you're going to have to use a lot of re-inkers. So keep your bowl as small as possible, as shallow as possible, with as wide of a circumference or diameter across the top as you can find in a small bowl. So these little ice cream dishes seem to work pretty well. So I'm just going to add, and I usually start with maybe 10-ish. You can start with less, and then we stir it up and we blow bubbles and we start. Now the nice part is if it's not quite as dark as you would like, you can always add more and it's not going to hurt anything. So this is hard to believe it's Gorgeous Grape. When I look at it, it doesn't really look like Gorgeous Grape, but it is. So now I am just going to blow some bubbles. And I don't want to get my head in here, so let me see if I can do this without getting my head under the camera. Need a longer straw. And then we're going to dip our cardstock into it and just let it sit there for a minute or so. Now you might want a piece of paper towel handy because bubbles can splash. Make sure your work surface is something that it's not going to hurt. Now you can see a little bit of the bubbles over here on this corner. And again, this is basic white, so I'm being careful not to get it too wet. But let's just continue to blow bubbles, and I'm going to continue to blow bubbles and dip this in. And you may have to dip it multiple times to get the amount of color that you want. And interestingly, it does start to darken as it dries. I'm not sure why that is, but it does. Now this is still pretty light, and so I'm going to add a little bit more re-inker. And like I said, this is something you want to play with, and just add a little at a time until it gets to be as dark as you want it. It will never get really, really dark, I'll be honest. Now, the other thing I found is that the smaller the bubbles, the more intense the color. So, like if I were to dip this in this right now, which is probably less bubbles and more foam, let me just show you. See how much more color there is on there? And that's okay. Maybe that's the look you're after. So again, play around with the amount of bubbles. The bigger the bubbles, the less color you're going to get. But you can see it is starting to get a little bit darker now that I've added some more re-inker in there. If you blow too hard, it spatters everywhere. So you have to be a little bit careful. And here we go. Now you can really start, I think, to get the idea of it. And I'm just turning it to different places. And sometimes you'll pick up some soap on your card. You can let it just dry. It'll be darkest if you just let it dry, or you can just blow on it and pop the bubbles. So let me get a little bit more over here, and then I think this background is probably about where we want it. And like I said, you can dip as much. You just don't want to put your corner of your card into the soap. I've done that before. It's why I usually always start out with a quarter sheet of paper. So this is 5.5 by 4 1/4. That way, if you get something on the edges, or if you happen to dip a little bit too far, then you can trim that off, right? Or you can use the extra to decorate the inside of your card. So isn't that kind of a cool, pretty technique? I like it. So this is on basic white. So let's see what it looks like on a piece of photo paper. So here I have photo paper. You could also use glossy cardstock if you have some. I'm going to try to get some of these bubbles, the foam, back down a little bit. Like I said, if you get foam, you will definitely have darker pattern. So let me just blow this up a little bit and see if I can not get too many big bubbles, and I'll show you what I mean. So I've kept a lot of foam on the top, and the bigger bubbles are underneath it. So let me just dip this in here. And then you can see it looks a little bit different. You've got a little bit smaller pattern, and here's some bubbles that are still kind of forming, or they didn't pop, let's say, and that will make a darker spot. So now let's go back to bigger bubbles. And sometimes if you start to get too much foam, I'll call it, you got to maybe take a spoon and clean it off if you don't want that look. But I kind of like it sometimes. It mixes it up a little bit. So now we need some in the middle. So I am definitely going to have bigger ones for in the middle, right? And I have to get them higher so I can get to the middle. Now I could have put my water in a little bit deeper in here. Just popping that last little bubble. If I had the water higher to the rim, then it would be easier because the bubbles would come higher. But there we go. Let me blow that one off. But you can see that was a fair amount of foam, but isn't that pretty? And you can tell, I don't know if you know that it's really gorgeous grape when you look at it. This one looks a little purplier than this one on the glossy cardstock. So the colors do look different depending on the cardstock. And I'm going to show it to you on this shimmer white. And shimmer white is probably almost impossible to see here on camera. It has just a little bit of sparkle if you're familiar with it. And I think I'm going to try to get rid of some of the foam if I can. Now I think you can probably also see that as I push this foam down, those are also darker. So smaller bubbles are going to be darker because they'll have more ink in them. So this one has a lot of foam. So let's see what it looks like on shimmery white. And I got a big pile of bubbles that I'm just going to blow on and burst. Okay, now they're in my hair. But that really looks like bubbles, doesn't it? The shimmery white cardstock, I like how it looks. It's probably handles the water the best, other than the glossy cardstock obviously handles water very well. Well, let me see if I can just take a paper towel, and I'm going to try to get rid of a little bit of my foam. If I was by a sink, I'd probably just take a spoon and scoop it off, but I am not by a sink, so we will just try to pop some of it here. But I do think you can see the color is very different in the bubbles around the edge than in the center. And it looks probably a lot darker on camera than it actually is. So let's blow some more bubbles. Okay, got some pretty good ones that time. A little bit larger. And you can see the larger ones, see how they're lighter than the ones over here where we had more foam mixed in. The circles are also bigger, which would be expected if you've got bigger bubbles. So again, it's a fun technique to play with. It's one that you're going to want to experiment with to get the look you're after. And everyone's going to turn out different. And besides that, it's just fun to blow bubbles without having to worry about mom maybe saying, don't blow bubbles in your milk, right? So that's on shimmery white. So let me move this out of the way before I spill my purple water all over my table. And let me just show you all three of these, and then I'm going to show you the cards. So this one is the shimmery white. This one is the glossy cardstock, and this one is the basic white. And you can see that they all work very well. Shimmery white has a little bit more creamy. It's not quite as white. Um, it resists the water a little bit more than the basic one, but I did this one first because then I put it in bigger bubbles. And but you can tell the two of these, they look quite different. And then the glossy one is probably the lightest color. I think the photo cover paper just absorbs the color a little bit differently. It is shiny, you can see the shine. So those are the three different cardstocks. And here's the card I made using that gorgeous grape. Now this border here is Highland Heather, and you can see the gorgeous grape is here in just a narrow edge inside the black. And you can see it really doesn't look a whole lot like gorgeous grape. It's more pink. Now, I had a little bit of ink floating on the surface down here. I didn't stir it probably as well as I should have. And that you can there see, I'm just trying to prove to you, it really is gorgeous grape. Okay, this was made with the Botanical Layers stamp set. I just kept it simple. This was a celebration item that they offered the last month of celebration, and that's when I got it. That stamp set had never really appealed to me before that, but when it's free, why not try it out? So I did, and oh my goodness, I'm using it all the time. Now I wish I bought it sooner. But anyway, that is my first card. This is embossed with basic black embossing powder on here. You could just stamp it. I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I did emboss it with basic black embossing powder. Now the other next card I'm going to show you was made with actually 3 different shades, and you, I'm sure, cannot tell that on here because I can't tell it, but 3 different shades of blue. I started out with boho blue because I wanted it to be light, and it was really, really light. I then went to Misty Moonlight, and I just added them all to the same bowl of water, let's say, and it still wasn't quite as dark as I wanted. This is a photo paper one, so it is lighter. And then I ended up adding some Night of Navy to get a little bit more color in there. And you can see here, you can see it a little bit darker. So here's this card. This is made with the Seaside Bay stamp set, one of my first ones that I fell in love with when we got the catalog. And I love it. It's got to do with water, right? I added it with Just Go Fishing Designer Series paper. I thought the birds would be liking a fish. I'm assuming these are fishing kinds of birds. I don't know what they are. I think I looked up one time what they were, but I'm not sure. But the idea here is the background. I'll bring it a little bit closer so you can see it. And this is on shimmery white cardstock. Okay, so this card here was on basic white, and this one is on shimmery white. I thought the shimmery white kind of mixed nicely with the very vanilla background a little. It's a little softer color. So that is that card. The inside, I just tore a piece. I had an extra bird because these are in sets of 3. So I had an extra bird, so just stuck him on there. So that is card number 2. And then card number 3. Has anybody else recently realized that Easter is coming much earlier this year than I'm used to? It is the last Sunday of this month. And so I need some Easter cards. So I thought I would use my bubble background. Now this card is petal pink. I've trimmed it in Calypso Coral, and the background is Calypso Coral. This one is also on basic white cardstock. So, and this uses the Playing in the Rain stamp set, another just adorable set that I love from the annual catalog. And here I did also make this in all 3. Most of these I made them in all 3 just because then I could choose which one I liked the best. And I ended up using basic white, but here's the shimmery white again. So if you want to compare, you can see it's not quite as white. And obviously the bubbles look a little bit different. I did with Calypso Coral, I did have to add a fair amount of inker, re-inker to the water because that is a lighter color. And then here it is on glossy, and you can see how much lighter it actually is on the glossy because the glossy resists the water a little bit more. So this one I just used, this is one of my favorite Easter sentiments. He is not here, but is risen, which we as Christians all know and understand that and are blessed, right? So little strip of designer series paper. This is long since retired. I think it might have been one of the very first stamp sets I bought when I became a demonstrator. So back in 2007, I believe. Probably how old that is, but it's one I'll always keep. So, and this is the Hello Irresistible designer paper. So let me bring them all in and we will just kind of line them up here for you so you can see all three of the cards. And that is the blowing bubbles technique. I hope you enjoyed that. It's kind of a fun technique. And like I said, it's, I think it'd be fun to do it with kids. I've done it in one of my technique classes before, and even the ladies of my age, they loved it too. We all love to blow bubbles, right? And remember blowing bubbles as a kid. So let me flip my camera back. All right. I hope you liked that. That was fun, wasn't it? I don't know. There's a kid in all of us. I guess we still like to blow bubbles. But if you enjoyed it, if you're new to my channel, I'd love to have you subscribe. And I am so happy you're here. It's fun to meet new people, and it's always fun to learn with friends. So if you like that, give me a thumbs up. Hope you had fun today and learned something, or maybe reminded you of something you've already known and just kind of forgotten about, because we all have those kinds of techniques, right? So have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining. God bless. Bye-bye.